Ever get this weird feeling like our cells are talking? Okay, maybe not talking, but what if they're like leaving little notes? Today's deep dive is going to blow your mind because we're getting into the nitty-gritty of single-cell RNA sequencing. It's this crazy detailed way to look at individual cells.
Yeah, we're talking like super up close and personal with your biology here.
Exactly, and you'd think, that's got to be pretty private, right? Like down to the cellular level?
You'd think so, but that's where this paper, Private Information Leakage from Single Cell Count Matrices, comes in. It's a bit of a wake-up call, honestly.
A wake-up call how? Spill the tea, I gotta know.
Well, researchers are basically finding ways to potentially connect your identity to datasets that are supposed to be anonymous, like even without your name attached. And this isn't just some theoretical what-if scenario. This paper shows it's actually happening, and that's pretty huge.
Okay, hold up. So you're saying someone could figure out it's my cells in a giant pile of data, even if my name isn't there?
Potentially, yeah. They're calling them linking attacks. Imagine someone, maybe with not so good intentions, gets their hands on a single-cell dataset. It's supposed to be anonymous, but then they also find another dataset. Maybe it's public, maybe it's from like a genetic testing company, right?
Okay, so two sets of data, both about genes in some way. And then what?
They work their magic. Using what we know about how gene expression works, they can link the dots between those two datasets, even if one seems totally random and anonymous.
Wait, slow down for a sec. Gene expression. Remind me what that is again?
Right, so basically it's how your genes actually do stuff. It's like the instructions written in your DNA turning into, you, and that process leaves a kind of signature.
So even if my name's not on my single-cell data, if someone knows enough about how my genes work, they can find me in a haystack of other people's cells.
Exactly. It's like your cells have this underlying biological fingerprint, and this paper shows that it's possible to use that fingerprint to link you to your data.
That's kind of creepy, not gonna lie. But is this like a common thing? Are we all in danger of having our cells outed?
That's the million-dollar question, right? The researchers here focused on a couple of publicly available data sets, and what they found is kind of concerning. A huge chunk of the people in those data sets were potentially vulnerable to these linking attacks.
So not a hypothetical problem then. Yikes. This is why we do these deep dives, folks. But before we get into solutions, back up a bit. Why is single-cell data so easy to crack the code on? I thought it was super complex.
You'd think that would make it safer, right? But it's kind of the opposite, because now we're not just looking at a jumbled mess of cells, we're looking at each cell individually.
So instead of a blurry photo of a crowd, it's like high-def portraits of every single person there.
Perfect analogy. And the more we do single-cell sequencing, the more of those portraits are out there just waiting to be potentially linked back to their owners.
Okay, this is seriously freaking me out. But we're not going to leave everyone hanging on a cliffhanger of despair, right? There's got to be some way to protect our privacy without shutting down all this groundbreaking research.
Oh, absolutely. There are some really clever strategies being developed right now. Some of them sound like they're straight out of science fiction, but they could be the key to having our cake and eating it too, so to speak.
You've successfully piqued my curiosity.
Yeah.
What kind of sci-fi solutions are we talking about here? Last time, we were teetering on the edge of, like, a genomic privacy black hole. But you also threw out some wild ideas for how to fix it, like messing with the data on purpose. Controlled chaos, you called it. I got to know more about that.
Right. So it's called differential privacy, and it's actually pretty clever. Imagine you've got a data set with, say, everyone's height. Instead of just having their exact height, you add or subtract a tiny bit randomly for each person.
Okay, so it's like fuzzing the numbers just enough that you can't tell exactly how tall someone is, even if you have the data.
Exactly. It makes those linking attacks way harder because the data itself is just a tiny bit dot off.
Yeah.
But the overall patterns, the important stuff, it's still there.
So it's still useful for research. It's just that individual identities are harder to pin down. Sneaky. But you mentioned something even weirder, something about doing math on encrypted data. How is that even possible?
Yeah, that's homomorphic encryption. It's like next level cryptography. And it's blowing my mind too, honestly. Think of it like this. You have a locked safe, but you can still add numbers written on the outside and get the right answer inside without ever opening it.
Whoa. Okay, my brain's trying to keep up here. But if this actually works, it could be huge, right? Like way beyond just genetics. Any kind of sensitive data could be protected this way.
Huge is an understatement. But there's always a but. It's still pretty early days. Homomorphic encryption takes a ton of computing power, so it's not exactly practical for everyday use yet.
Yet, there's always hope. But in the meantime, what can researchers do right now to keep our data safe? We can't just sit around and wait for the future to arrive.
Absolutely not. There are definitely best practices they should be following. A big one is data minimization. Basically, only collect the data you absolutely need. Don't need someone's shoe size for a genetic study. Don't ask, don't store it.
Simple as that. Keep it lean, keep it clean. Love it. What else?
Access control. Like, who has the keys to the data vault, right? Limit access only to those who absolutely need it and make sure they're using strong passwords, two-factor authentication, all that good stuff.
Digital security basics, but for our DNA. Can't hurt, right?
Exactly. And this might seem obvious, but stay updated. Software updates, security patches, all that. Gotta stay ahead of the hackers, you know?
No more ignoring those update reminders. Got it.
Huh.
But even with all that, sometimes stuff happens. Systems get breached. Mistakes are made. What about the human side of this? What about informed consent?
So important. People need to know what they're getting into when they donate their samples for research, and part of that is being honest about the risks, including the risk of a privacy breach, however small.
So no more burying it in the fine print of those consent forms.
No way. Transparency is key. Researchers need to clearly explain how the data will be used, stored, how long it will be kept, and people need to feel like they can say no or even change their mind later on.
So it's an ongoing conversation, not just a one-time thing. But with all the crazy advances happening in genomics, how can anyone truly consent to how their data might be used years from now? That's like predicting the future.
You're right, it's tough. Asking people to reconsent every time there's a new discovery would be impossible. That's why some researchers are really excited about this idea of dynamic consent platforms.
Okay, you're going to have to explain this one. Dynamic consent platforms, what were we talking about here? Dynamic consent platforms. Okay, yeah, that sounds kind of techie, but also kind of cool. Break it down for me like I'm 5.
Okay, so picture this, like a website, right? But it's your own personal genomic data hub. You log in and you can see, oh, this research team wants to use my data for this study on, say, Alzheimer's. And you can say yes or no, or maybe ask some more questions.
So I'm in the driver's seat, calling the shots about my own data. I like it.
Yeah.
But is that too much responsibility for, like, the average person? Not everyone wants to be that hands-on with their DNA, right?
Totally. That's why these platforms have got to be super user-friendly, clear language, easy to navigate, all that good stuff. Education is key, too.
Right, because what good is all this control if you don't understand the choices you're making? It's like handing someone a million-button remote and being like, good luck.
Exactly. And that's where, honestly, it goes beyond just the science. We need everyone involved. Policymakers, ethicists, the whole shebang.
It was bigger than just a tech fix. It's like we're rethinking how we deal with this whole new world of genomic data.
100%. Finding that balance between groundbreaking science and protecting people's rights. That's the tightrope we're walking here.
Well said. And on that note, I think we've given our listeners a lot to chew on today. From the potential for privacy leaks to, like, mind-bending encryption techniques. Wow, single-cell genomics is a wild ride.
It really is. And this is just the beginning.
So, as always, dear listeners, we want to hear from you. Hit us up on social media. Tell us what you think, what freaked you out the most, what gave you hope. And in the meantime, keep those brain cells buzzing, because every deep dive just leads to more questions. Until next time.